My neighbors said it was just, the pipes are making noise, until I found what he was hiding in the basement. My neighbor said it was just, the pipes making noise. But when I broke through the wall between our basements, I found a living person, shackled, filthy, whispering my name. And the scariest part wasn't that she was there. It was that she knew who I was. Let me tell you everything from the beginning, before the nightmares, before the court cases, before the headlines, before I started sleeping with the lights on. I moved into that duplex in the middle of November, right after my divorce was finalized. I needed somewhere quiet, away from downtown and away from my ex-husband's shadow. The place was old, but charming in a way that made me feel like maybe life could start over again. The floors creaked, the heater groaned, and there was a weird stain on the kitchen ceiling I convinced myself was just water damage. Still, it was mine. The other half of the duplex was already occupied by a man in his 60s named Mr. Branner. I met him the first day when I was dragging boxes up the steps. He didn't offer to help, just stood on his porch in a gray sweater that looked older than I was. "You the new girl?" he asked, eyes squinting like the sun bothered him more than it should have. I told him my name, Sophie, and that I was renting month to month. He nodded, didn't smile. "Watch out for the pipes," he said. "They knock." And then he went back inside. The first week was uneventful, mostly me adjusting to the silence after years of marriage and constant noise. I binge-watched bad sitcoms, learned how to cook rice without ruining it, and started sleeping with the window cracked open because the radiator would hiss and bang so loud at night that it felt like the house was breathing. But then the noises changed. It was around 2:40 a.m., the first time I really noticed it. A heavy dragging sound, like someone was pulling something metal across a concrete floor. I sat up in bed and listened. At first, I thought it might be an animal in the crawl space. Then the sound stopped abruptly, followed by a single sharp clank. The next morning, I ran into Mr. Branner outside. He was hosing down the sidewalk even though it was freezing out. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "I think I heard something weird last night, like pipes or something." He didn't look at me. "Pipes, old place, they talk." And that was it. Not even a glance in my direction, just the sound of water hitting concrete. I tried not to obsess, but each night the sounds got a little stranger. Sometimes it was tapping, sometimes something that sounded like breathing, slow and rhythmic. Once I could have sworn I heard what sounded like crying, muffled and low, as if someone was trying desperately not to be heard. I asked a few neighbors on the street about Mr. Branner. Most just shrugged. One woman, an older lady with tightly pinned gray curls, told me, "He's been here forever, keeps to himself, don't go bothering him." Another man said, "Just stay out of his basement. That's all I'll say." It felt like everyone knew something I didn't. I tried brushing it off. I was a grown woman, not some scared teenager jumping at shadows. But then, one night, I was in my basement doing laundry when I heard something from the other side of the wall. A faint thump, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone whispering. I froze. My laundry machine wasn't running yet. I was the only one home. "Hello?" I called out, louder than I intended. Silence. Then another whisper. Too soft to make out words, but definitely human. I ran upstairs and locked the basement door behind me. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was a draft, or the sound carried weird through the pipes. I didn't sleep that night. A few days later, I saw Branner loading black garbage bags into the back of an old station wagon. It was nearly 3 a.m. I watched from my upstairs window as he drove off without headlights. That same week, the noises started again, this time louder, angrier. Scraping, dragging, a sudden slam. I left a flashlight recording on my phone in the basement overnight. When I checked it the next day, there were hours of silence, until around 3:11 a.m., when the audio picked up what sounded like a woman's voice whispering over and over again, "Help me. Please, please help me." It was so faint I had to use earbuds just to hear it clearly. And then at 3:13 a.m., another voice cut through the static. A man's voice. "Shut up." Then nothing. I didn't go to the police yet. What could I say? That I heard weird sounds through a wall in a building with bad plumbing? That my creepy neighbor took out trash at night? I started keeping a journal. Every noise, every whisper, every time I caught Branner watching me through his curtain. I was spiraling, and I knew it. But the worst part was that part of me didn't want to know the truth. Because if the truth was what I feared, then I wasn't living next to a quiet old man. I was living next to a predator, and something, or someone was trapped in his basement. I became obsessed. I'd tell myself during the day that it was probably nothing. Just old pipes, poor insulation, maybe a radio left on in the basement. But then night would fall, and I'd find myself lying in bed, eyes wide open, listening. Listening for that voice again. It came back 3 nights later, same time, 3:11 a.m. Only this time she didn't whisper. She cried. A long, aching sob that sounded like every ounce of hope was draining from her. And then, silence. Then footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. Then a bang. I sat bolt upright in bed. I wanted to throw up. I called the non-emergency line. When I said I lived in a duplex and thought my neighbor might be abusing someone, they asked if I had any evidence. I sent them the audio clip. The officer I spoke with promised to check it out in the morning. Morning came. No one showed. The next night I saw Branner again. He was in the backyard, digging. Not gardening, digging. It was 1:45 a.m., and he was using a small shovel to move dirt beside his garage. I watched from the darkened upstairs hallway, hidden behind the curtain. He didn't have a flashlight, no headlamp, just moved like he could see perfectly in the dark, like he'd done it before. The next day, I walked out back and found the dirt disturbed, but not enough to prove anything. I pushed my foot into the ground where he'd dug and felt something harder than dirt underneath. Maybe rock. Maybe wood. I didn't touch it. I wasn't ready for whatever that truth was. Instead, I turned my obsession inward. I started researching the property. Not just the duplex, but the entire street. And that's when I found the article. Teen girl missing, last seen near Maple and 7th. It was dated 2008. Her name was Elena Rivera, 16 years old, lived 2 blocks down. Her parents were on vacation. She never came home from a friend's house. They never found her. There were quotes from neighbors, how she'd sometimes take a shortcut behind the duplex on Maple, how she walked alone after dark. And then I saw it. One anonymous neighbor claims he saw Elena speaking with a man fitting the description of an older gentleman who lived at the corner duplex. That was this building. That was Branner. The article didn't name him. No charges, no evidence. Just a whisper, a ghost of suspicion. But now I couldn't unsee it. That night I dreamt of a girl banging on a wall, blood dripping from her mouth, mouthing words I couldn't hear. When I woke up, I'd bitten my tongue in my sleep. I made a decision. If the cops wouldn't help, I'd document everything myself. I bought a cheap security camera and installed it in the corner of my basement, pointed directly at the shared wall. I installed a vibration sensor. I even set up motion-activated lights just in case anything moved. For the next 4 days, I watched Branner's schedule. He was always home during the day, watched TV too loud, lived in his bathrobe. But every other night, he left between 2 and 3 a.m., carrying black garbage bags. Always the same route, always gone 20 minutes or less. And the same nights he left, that's when the noises would start again. One night, I stayed in the basement, crouched in the corner behind my dryer, flashlight in hand, recorder running. And then it happened. A metallic sound behind the wall, like chains shifting. I held my breath. Then I heard it. A voice, so close I could have sworn it was inside the room with me. "Please, please, help me!" I turned my flashlight to the wall and whispered, "Can you hear me?" There was a pause. Then, shockingly, yes. My whole body turned to ice. I dropped the flashlight. I stumbled upstairs, locked the door behind me, and sat on the kitchen floor shaking. The next day, I called the police again. This time, I lied. I said I heard screams, that I was certain someone was trapped down there. They came. They knocked on his door. I watched through the peephole as Branner answered like nothing was wrong. Calm. Almost too calm. They walked through his half of the duplex, asked a few questions. He even let them down to the basement. 15 minutes later, they left. I stepped out to ask one of the officers what they found. He looked bored. Just a lot of old junk and water heaters. Guys got a mess down there, but nothing illegal. I wanted to scream. When I checked the footage from my camera that night, I watched as the lights in Branner's basement flared on. Then the motion sensor went crazy. 5, 10, 15 separate detections, but nothing moved on camera. And then the audio. Static, static, and then very clearly my name. Sophie. Not a scream, not a whisper, just a soft plea. Sophie, help me. I fell back from the laptop. I paused the audio, played it again, over and over. She knew my name, and she sounded afraid. The next morning, my basement smelled like bleach. Through the wall, I could hear Branner whistling. The same tune over and over again. I didn't recognize the melody, but it chilled me to the bone. Because it wasn't cheerful. It was the kind of song you hum when you're cleaning something you don't want anyone to ever see again. The smell got worse every night. Not just bleach, something underneath it. Something sour, metallic, like mold, rotting meat, and blood that had been scrubbed but never really washed away. I started leaving the house during the day just to get a break from it. I worked from cafes, took long walks, loitered in the aisles of hardware stores pretending to be interested in grout or chainsaws. I didn't care. I just didn't want to be home. I think Branner noticed. I caught him staring at me once when I came back with groceries. He was standing on his porch, one hand on the banister, just watching me with that dead-eyed stare. He didn't blink. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just turned and went back inside, slow and silent, like a spider crawling back into its hole. That night I heard the dragging sound again, but this time it didn't stop at the wall. It moved. Across the floor. And then up. Toward the ceiling. It was above me. I was in bed, eyes glued to the peeling plaster above, heart pounding. I couldn't move. The dragging stopped. A creak. Another. Was someone in my attic? I forced myself out of bed and crept into the hallway with my phone flashlight. I opened the attic hatch slowly, the ladder groaning with every inch. My breath hitched as I poked my head up. Empty. Dust, cobwebs, nothing more. And then I noticed something. A thin, almost invisible wire stretched across the attic space. Taped to it was a microphone. What the hell? I followed it to the far wall, where the wire snaked through a drilled hole directly into the shared structure between our halves of the duplex. He'd been listening to me. Recording me. I ripped the wire down, heart hammering, hands shaking with rage and fear. That was the moment everything changed. I wasn't safe. I wasn't just paranoid. I was being watched, monitored, hunted. I went to the hardware store and bought tools, a hammer, a crowbar, a mini sledgehammer. And then I went to work on my basement. At first I tried subtle, knocking on the wall, looking for hollow points, mapping the studs. I measured carefully, then tore out a panel of drywall about 6 feet wide, right where the sound had come from the night I heard my name. Behind the drywall was brick, old, stained, uneven. But near the bottom, about a foot off the ground, was a vent, one I'd never noticed. It looked almost decorative, like a cheap plastic grate. I popped it off. Behind it was black. Not a pipe, not insulation, a space, a crawl space. I stuck my phone in, flashlight on, and recorded a 30-second video. Then I pulled it back out and hit play. The screen was grainy. Dust particles swirled like snow. At first I saw nothing. Then a movement in the dark. A hand. Thin, pale, fingers twitching, and an eye, wide, unblinking, looking directly into the camera. I dropped the phone. My knees gave out. I collapsed against the wall, clutching my chest, trying not to scream. She was real. She was right there, trapped behind the wall. I tried calling the police again, this time sobbing, shouting, demanding they send someone. I played the video. The dispatcher sounded skeptical but agreed to send a patrol car. 2 hours later, they showed up. Not detectives, just 2 uniforms who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I showed them the video. They made me play it 3 times. Finally, one said, "Looks like an old movie clip. You sure this isn't some kind of prank?" "A prank?" I screamed. "She's right there." The other officer knelt down and poked into the hole. "There's nothing in there now, just empty space." "She moved," I said. "She's scared. He probably heard me." They exchanged a glance. The first one straightened up. "We'll file a report," he said. "You should consider taking a break from the house for a while. Maybe visit family." Family. I laughed. Not because it was funny, or because it was cruel. My family hadn't spoken to me since the divorce. I was alone. As they left, Branner stood at his window just behind the curtain. I could see the edge of his eye, watching. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my living room with the hammer in my lap, eyes on the basement door, just in case. The next morning, I went back down. I widened the hole with a crowbar. My hands were blistered, fingers raw, but I didn't stop until I could crawl through. It was tight, cold, pitch black. But I pushed forward on my stomach, dragging myself through dirt and dust until I reached the other side. I found a small concrete room. No door, no windows, just walls, a drain, and chains bolted into the floor. Blood on the walls, fingernail scratches, a mattress rotting soaked in something brown, and a name carved into the wall over and over again. Elena. I wanted to scream. I wanted to vomit. But more than anything, I wanted to get out. As I turned to crawl back through, I heard something. A shuffle, then a voice just behind me. You shouldn't be here. I froze. It wasn't Branner. It was her, the girl, and she sounded terrified. You shouldn't be here. The voice was barely above a whisper, trembling with fear. But it was close, too close. I turned slowly, still crouched in the crawl space, trying not to breathe too loudly. There she was. A girl, maybe mid-20s, filthy, skeletal, her hair tangled and clinging to her face. Her eyes were huge in the dim light, like they'd forgotten how to blink. She flinched when I moved. Don't scream, I whispered. I'm not him. I live next door. I heard you. I've been trying to find you. She stared at me like I was a ghost. Her lips trembled, but she didn't speak again. I'm Sophie, I said. What's your name? A pause, then barely audible. Gina. She looked behind her toward the dark as if she expected something or someone to lunge from it. Is he here? I asked. She shook her head quickly. He left. Not for long. He always comes back. If he finds you, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. I crawled farther into the space. I could see more now. There were makeshift shelves along the far wall, holding jugs of water, canned food, plastic bags, a bucket in the corner, a soiled blanket, duct tape, rope. He had made her a prison. He's done this before, I whispered. Gina nodded, tears welling in her eyes. How long have you been down here? She didn't answer at first. Then she looked down at her wrists, where the skin was bruised and raw. I stopped counting after the 100th day. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I reached for her gently. We have to go. Now before he comes back, but she recoiled. Number, I can't. Why? There's another one. The words hit me like a slap. What? He keeps them in the sub-basement. Only brings them out when he wants to punish me. My stomach turned to ice. There's another entrance from his side. I wanted to scream, cry, throw up, but I didn't have time. I pulled my phone from my hoodie pocket and turned on the flashlight, panning it across the space. I didn't see any trapdoors or tunnels, just Gina and fear. I'm getting you out first, I said. Then I'll call the police. I swear to God I'll bring them back, and this time they'll listen. She hesitated, then gave me a slight nod. We crawled back through the hole together. Her breathing was shallow and fast, like an animal on the verge of collapse. When we emerged into my basement, she collapsed onto the cold floor, blinking against the light. I locked the door behind us and helped her up the stairs. She was trembling. Her skin was cold. I gave her a blanket, sat her on the couch, and grabbed water from the fridge. She drank like she hadn't tasted anything clean in months. Then, without warning, she grabbed my wrist. Don't call the police yet. Why not? Because he's not just some creep. He has photos, videos. He said if I ever escaped, people would think I was part of it. That I helped him. That's insane. She looked me dead in the eye. He made me bury one of them. Silence. I sat down across from her, feeling the world tilt beneath me. I don't care what he has, I said. He can't hurt you anymore. But even as I said it, I knew I was lying. Branner was smart, calculating, and something told me this wasn't his first time. I took photos of the crawl space, of the room. I filmed Gina talking, telling me her name and what he'd done. I backed everything up to a cloud account I hadn't used since college. Then I made the call. I didn't use the non-emergency line. I dialed 911. This is not a false alarm, I said. There's a kidnapped woman in my house. She escaped from next door. I have evidence. Come now. This time they believed me. Maybe it was the desperation in my voice. Maybe it was the trembling in Gina's. Maybe it was just luck. Within minutes, red and blue lights painted my living room walls. They took Gina into protective custody. I gave my statement, showed them the footage, led them to the crawl space, and then the shouting started. Officers banged on Branner's door. No answer. So they broke it down. I watched from my porch, arms wrapped around myself as they stormed inside. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Then an officer came back out, face pale. "We found another door," he said. "We need more units, and a medical team." I felt like I was floating outside my body. They pulled someone out on a stretcher, covered in blankets, face hidden. A man, I think, thin, barely conscious. He was followed by crime scene techs, then a canine unit. The last one out was a detective with a walkie in one hand and a grim expression on his face. "Who's the tenant here?" he asked. "I am Sophie Bell." He nodded. "We'll need you to come down to the station. There's a lot to go through." "Where's Branner?" I asked. The detective hesitated. "He's gone." "Gone?" "Out the back, probably through the woods. We're setting up a perimeter." I looked at the trees beyond the backyard, dense, dark, endless. He was out there somewhere, watching, waiting, and he knew I'd found them. They didn't find him. Not that night, not the next day, not even after the police brought dogs, drones, and dozens of boots into the forest behind our block. It was like he disappeared into the trees and dissolved. I kept expecting to wake up and find him in my kitchen or outside my window whistling that same eerie tune I'd heard through the walls, but the only sound now was silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The kind that didn't mean peace. The kind that meant something was still out there, unfinished. The cops kept me at the station until nearly 3 a.m. I told them everything. The sounds, the crawl space, the camera footage, the attic wire, even the dreams. They didn't laugh. Not even once. That somehow made it worse, because it meant they believed me. Or at least believed enough. They found records in Branner's name going back 40 years. Military background, discharged early. No spouse, no children, no listed relatives. The house had belonged to his mother until she died. Apparently, she'd been bedridden the last decade of her life, and Branner had cared for her. Alone. No one had seen her funeral. There was no death certificate. One of the detectives pulled me aside. "We're checking the backyard. Ground-penetrating radar. If there are bodies there, we'll find them. Bodies. Plural." I thought of the girl from the 2008 article, Elena. I asked if they'd found her. The detective hesitated. "We can't confirm anything yet," but I saw it in his eyes. They had. The news hit the next day. I woke up to a swarm of reporters on the front lawn, sticking microphones over my porch railing, shouting questions at my door. "Did you know him personally? Were you ever threatened? Did you hear screams?" I closed the curtains and didn't leave for 2 days. The internet exploded. My name was leaked. The crawl space footage ended up on Reddit. There were memes, debates, even a podcast episode within 48 hours. They called Branner the basement butcher, the silent neighbor, the man next door, as if he were just another campfire tale. But he wasn't a story. He was real, and he was still missing. Gina was taken to a secure facility. I was told not to contact her for now, for legal and safety reasons. I understood. She needed peace. She needed to forget. But I couldn't forget, especially not after the package arrived. It was 4 days after the raid. No return address, just a plain, unmarked envelope taped to my front door. Inside was a USB drive. I don't know why I plugged it into my laptop. Curiosity, stupidity, hope, maybe all three. There were 5 video files. All of them were surveillance clips of me sleeping, eating, brushing my teeth, changing clothes. Each was labeled with a date and time. Each filmed from a different angle. Angles that didn't make sense. From my ceiling corner, inside my closet, even from under my bed. I dropped the laptop. I couldn't breathe. He'd been in my house, repeatedly, while I slept, while I lived, while I pretended I was safe. The last video was different. It wasn't me. It was Branner. Filmed selfie style in a dim, wooded area, night vision lens on, his face eerily green and ghost-like, his expression calm, almost serene. "You're very clever, Sophie," he said, "and brave. I admire that." I backed away from the screen. "I've always hated cowards," he continued. You're not one. That's why I waited. A long pause. You think you've won, but you don't understand. They chose me. I only kept them because no one else would. I gave them shelter. I gave them silence. He smiled and something in my chest broke. I'm not the only one, you know. There are others. And some of them aren't as kind as I am. Then the video cut to black. I called the detectives. They took the drive, promised to escalate the search, promised protection, promised I'd be safe. But I wasn't. I stopped sleeping. I stopped leaving the house. Even though they posted a squad car outside for 3 nights in a row, I still felt watched. The shadows in the hallway seemed to stretch longer at night. I kept the basement locked and taped over the attic hatch. I stopped turning on music or the TV because I needed to hear everything. Every creak, every breath, every whisper. One night, I found muddy footprints in my kitchen, leading from the back door to the hallway. The door had been locked. The prints stopped halfway down the hall, like he'd just vanished. The cops searched. Again. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints. They said maybe it was an old stain I hadn't noticed. But I knew. He was still playing with me, letting me know he could come back whenever he wanted. The final straw came a week later. My phone buzzed at 3:11 a.m. No caller ID. I picked up without thinking. A whisper. Not Gina, not Branner, but a child's voice.
Help me.
Then static. Then the line went dead. I threw the phone. Screamed. Collapsed in the hallway sobbing. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't pretend I was surviving. I packed a bag and drove to the city that night. Rented a hotel under a fake name. Called a lawyer. Started the process of terminating my lease. I haven't been back since. I never even went back for the furniture. They called me 2 weeks later, said they'd found Branner's body. In the woods. Shot through the head. Apparent suicide. But no gun was ever recovered. And his fingerprints were found on the inside of the basement door. From my side. They ruled it a suicide. I read it in the paper while staying in a rented apartment 3 cities away, living under a name that wasn't mine. Reclusive man found dead in woods, linked to basement captivity case. They buried the headline under real estate ads and sports scores, like it was a story people were already tired of hearing. But I wasn't tired of it. I was still living it. Branner's death didn't bring relief. It brought questions. Why now? Why that way? Why leave no weapon behind? And why leave me that USB? The detectives said he probably tossed the gun or someone took it. They said he was delusional, paranoid, and alone. People like that unravel when they lose control. But Branner was never out of control. Everything he did was calculated, controlled. I think he wanted me to see him die without justice. I think he wanted to haunt me without ever being a ghost. And maybe he succeeded. The trial took months to assemble. Gina testified under a sealed identity. Her statement shook the courtroom. She spoke of months spent in darkness, of being forced to dig holes at night in the backyard, of being starved and silenced and punished. They played my audio recordings. They showed the crawl space. They brought in forensic teams who testified about the blood patterns, the hidden passages, the fingerprints on the chains. Then came the bones. 4 confirmed sets of remains. 2 identified. Elena Rivera was one. The others weren't. No one claimed them. No one missed them. The prosecution argued that Branner had likely been abducting people for years. Hitchhikers, runaways, people who wouldn't be tracked. The media labeled him America's last basement killer. They said I was a hero, but I didn't feel like one. I couldn't sleep without medication. I checked locks 3, 4, 5 times a night. I kept the lights on. I taped blackout curtains to the windows. I installed 5 cameras in my new apartment and never used the laundry room alone. Every knock at the door made my stomach twist. Every flicker of sound made my heart race. I tried therapy. I tried silence. Neither worked. Then one day I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Thank you. That's all it said. I knew it was Gina. She couldn't reach out directly, but I recognized her handwriting from the court documents. I cried for an hour. Some part of me needed that, to know she'd made it, that she was free, that maybe we both were. But I still couldn't go home. That duplex remained sealed for weeks. Then it was sold, torn down. A new townhouse went up in its place, sleek, modern, white exterior with tall windows and a fake wood door. Sometimes I drive past it. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. some part of me hoping I'll see him, in the window behind the glass, staring back, smiling. I never do. But once, and this is true, I swear, I parked across the street at night and just watched the house. Lights were off, curtains drawn. It was quiet. Then, at exactly 3:11 a.m., the porch light flicked on by itself. No one came out. No one was there. It stayed on for 10 seconds, then shut off. I left immediately, haven't gone back since. They say trauma changes your brain, that it rewires your instincts, makes you more alert, more cautious, more afraid. I don't argue. I don't tell people what really happened. Most couldn't handle it. Some even say I exaggerated it for the attention, that I was lucky to stumble into a headline. But I know what I lived through. I know what was behind the wall. I know the smell of bleach and blood and bone. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still hear it. The slow, dragging sound across a concrete floor. The pipes, they called it. Just the pipes. But they weren't. They never were. And now, every time I hear the faintest knock in the night, I ask myself the same question. What if there's another one? What if I only found one basement? What if the rest are still hidden?